Hey folks, Chuck Black here. We are doing 52 weeks of Python. We're in week number 35, and the topic for this week is object-oriented programming. Now I say it's object-oriented programming, but really it's the first of multiple lessons on this topic because it is kind of a big deal and a little bit important, and most of the stuff that you deal with, you probably have already been using object-oriented programming stuff and you don't even know it. And so it's something that you want to be aware of. If you are going to take your software development skills from a script writer to a programmer to actually a developer of software, then you're going to want to understand this stuff. And even if you just want to live in the programmer world, you're going to want to know how to do this if you're going to write any amount of software. And even just knowing the concepts is going to be important. So I strongly encourage you to learn this stuff. And even if you're not going to be writing boatloads of object-oriented code in the near future, if you understand some of the terms and some of the concepts, then you'll be way ahead of the game. So speaking of terms and concepts, we're going to be talking about objects. We're going to be talking about classes. We're going to be talking about advantages of object-oriented stuff, including things like encapsulation and inheritance. And we'll touch on polymorphism. We will talk about defining a class and creating an instance of a class. We'll be looking briefly at code, but we're going to frankly spend more time going into the code in greater detail in the next lesson. But if you're thinking about clicking stop right now because you only want to look at the code, I strongly encourage you, maybe I'm even pleading with you, to listen to the concept so you have the basic fundamental background so that you can understand what it is that we're talking about. All right, enough of that. Let's go straight to the lesson. Okay, so let's talk about object-oriented programming. Now I have some slides that I've created, and I actually did animations on the slide to make sure that you pay attention to what I'm talking about and you don't read ahead. But since I may be flipping back and forth between code and the actual slide picture that I'm describing, I decided to do it this way. So my request would be that, especially if you don't understand this stuff, that you not read ahead, but you listen to what I say and go at the pace that I'm describing things. Of course, if you understand this stuff already, then you can go and look at whatever you want. But let's get started. In a traditional way of doing things, in other words, all of the software that we've written so far, at least our code, followed a certain structure or pattern, and that is that we defined some data and then we defined some code that would operate on that data. So the code could be separated into functions. It involved loops. It did I/O, such as reading and writing from files and going out to the network, things of that nature. It printed stuff. It did comparisons. It took input, etc., etc., etc. It did all that stuff, and it operated on this data that we had defined. Now, one thing to note is that we defined this data, but any piece of code could operate on any piece of that data in general. So there's no tight linkage in the programming language between the code and the data. It's pretty much a free-for-all. Now, good developers would use techniques that would allow only certain code to operate on certain data, but that would be something that you'd have to put into your code. It isn't something that comes automatically. Compare that to an object-oriented way of doing things. With object-oriented software, what you do is you define these things that we call objects, and each object has its own data and it has its own code. And so the code that you write associated with that object or object type will operate on that data. Other objects are not able to operate on that data. Only the code associated with that object is able to operate on that data. That's the general way that things work. So in the traditional manner, you define some dictionaries and lists and things of that nature, then you write a bunch of code that does various things. In an object-oriented way of doing things, instead of doing it that way, you define classes, and I'll get into this, and when you create an instance of a class, we call that an object, and these objects each have their own data and they have their own code. So I know that this is new for many of you, so let's keep going, and I'm going to go back and forth and you will see some examples of this. In fact, right now, why don't I go over here? I have our simple devices. That was the second lesson that we looked at. I forget what week it was, but in general, what did we do? Well, we defined some data. This device, the device was a dictionary, and then we eventually had something that was a list called devices, and then we had some code. Now our code in this one didn't do anything really interesting other than print the data, and so here it prints the data using Pretty Print. Here it did it using Tabulate. So that's all well and good. When you got into things that were a little bit more advanced, then you had things like this where we actually called a function where we created all the data that we were going to use. And then after we had created that function, here we printed out, but then we began to do some operations on it. We did comparisons. We did this loop inside of a loop looking for duplicates. We did a whole bunch of stuff, but the idea is that here's our code that operates on the data, and the data actually exists in, it exists as part of the program, but there's no association that links the code to the data other than the fact that the code itself makes reference to it. And that's true like with nested data. Nested data, we're creating an entire network. And so that's the general idea of traditional data. Traditional programming, even structured programming, you would define your data and then you would define code to operate on that data. In an object-oriented world, it is simply that you define these objects that have their own data and they have their own code to operate on that data. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, let's look at some of the advantages of doing it this object-oriented way. One of the reasons is that in many cases, this object-oriented way of doing things is a better reflection of reality. So if you think for a moment about something like a car has a bunch of data associated with it in terms of the state of the engine and the tires and where the steering wheel is pointed and the amount of horsepower and the propulsion that's coming from the engine, etc. And it has code which effectively works on things like a steering wheel or a gas pedal, things of that nature. Think for a moment about, in your mind, put up a picture of games that you have done, whether it's a first-person shooter or something like that, or a World of Warcraft type of game where you have all these objects in the forms of beasts and people have whatever you are, the entity that you represent, whether it's an elf or a human or some other type of thing. You have a certain amount of health, so you have a health score, you have a strength score, you have the ability to maybe cast spells. All of these things are associated with that object. And so if you think about games like that, you can imagine, well, yeah, I can see writing software where you have an object which is a character in a game or a car in a race or something like that, where you are simulating it, where it makes sense to have something like this. Okay, let's go even a little bit further and bring it more close to home. What about networking devices? Networking devices have a bunch of data associated with them. They have a host name, they have an IP address, they have a MAC address, they have a set of interfaces, they have a serial number, they have operations that you can perform, such as turning on or off OSPF or having it ping something or setting up a routing table and engaging the routing engine, things of that nature. So this is also, the networking world is a prime candidate for modeling based on object-oriented way of doing things. So it reflects reality a little bit better than just lines of code operating on some data in the world. Now let's talk a little bit more about some of the real advantages. So one advantage of this is that it has this is the word that you will hear. That word is called encapsulation. The general idea of that is within this object, you can encapsulate. That means it can contain all of the nasty details about that object that you don't want somebody else to have to worry about. So, in fact, I'm going to go here and look at this. When we dealt with Paramiko or NetMiko or Napalm, they hid they hid details about the particular SSH session or this SSH session with a networking device, or in Napalm's case, it even hid, why am I saying that? It even hid the actual communication method. So sometimes it used NX API, sometimes it would use netconf, sometimes it would use SSH. So all of those things, when you used that, were hidden from you, and you would probably suspect, I wonder if they used object-oriented programming to implement Napalm or NetMiko or Paramiko, and I can tell you for certain that yes, they have done it in that way. So they hid the details from us. So it hides all of the ugly details that we don't have to worry about. Another thing that's true about the real world is this. So think about networking devices, or think about cars, or think about characters in a game. They all are one general type of thing, but then there are specific instances that are unique in their own way. So if I think of like the Lord of the Rings type of game, you have characters, and some of those characters might be wizards, and some might be hobbits, and some might be elves, etc. With cars, of course, you have different types of cars. You might even have multiple levels where you have something that's a car, but then you separate them into front-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive versus all-wheel drive, and then underneath that, your front-wheel drive cars might be the smaller ones, and the rear-wheel drive might be trucks and things of that nature. So you have this hierarchy, and that is all possible in object-oriented programming. Let's come back to networking and think about networking. So you have a device, and then you can have a Cisco device or a Juniper device or an HP device or an Arista device. And then within, let's say, Cisco, just to pick on them for a while, they don't just have one type of device that you can communicate in one way with in one way. They have multiple device families or product families, and they're all implemented by different teams that they've either absorbed or created, and they do things in different ways. So you have, even within the CLI, you have different CLI commands depending on whether the device is a CSR device or a different iOS device or a Nexus device, what have you. So being able to inherit commonality and then having specific characteristics is something that you want, and that is possible with object-oriented programming. The last thing is somewhat related to this, but this is a word that they talk about, polymorphism. That generally means something that can mean multiple things depending on its context. And so the example that everybody always gives, that I'll give you, is a shape. So you can have in geometry a shape. Now that shape can be a different types of shape. You can have a square, you can have a rectangle, you can have a circle, you can have a triangle. All of these shapes allow you, or we can in math, calculate the area of that shape. And so for that particular object, we would like to call into a function that says, get me the area of that thing. Well, if it's a circle, then we would calculate it in the area in one manner. If it's a rectangle, we calculate it in another way. And if it was a square, then we could even use a different way. We would just do the length of the side squared. If it's a triangle, we would do something different. So polymorphism allows you to call the same function and have it do different things. An example that you may be aware of from, let's say, Napalm. In Napalm, I can say something like get facts, and it doesn't matter in the situation that we looked at whether it was an XOS device or a CSR device, iOS device, which is what the OS is, it would be able to get the facts for that, also get interfaces. So here again is that idea of abstraction. I can call one function and have it do all the nasty stuff underneath. So what is getFacts doing for us? Well, number one, it's reflecting reality because I should be able to get facts from a device. It's encapsulating things so I don't have to worry about all of the different details. It's using inheritance because a device is a device and they all support getFacts, but they're unique in the different, when you get down to the different device types. And of course, polymorphism, also called overloading, is the idea that I can call this single function getFacts, and it doesn't matter what's underneath it, it will get that information for me. So that's an overview of some of the things. Let's look at a couple other items that are related to object-orientedness as well. Okay, so now that we hopefully all agree that there's definitely some advantages to doing things this way, and we've looked at some of those advantages, you may be asking yourself, wait a minute, does that mean all this code that I've spent 34 weeks writing needs to be completely rewritten so everything is object-oriented entirely? Well, the good news is there's only certain languages that require everything to be an object like this, and Python is not one of them. Even though behind the scenes in Python people say everything is an object, they're not talking about implementing classes and object instances alone and throwing out all of this stuff. Obviously, they're just referring to the data. So what does that mean in real life? Well, in real life, this is what you're going to end up with. This is what we did before. This is pure object-oriented. In a typical application, especially the ones that you will be dealing with, there will be a combination of objects as well as regular code. And you may be asking yourself, well, how can that work? And the answer is you've already done it. If you have done Napalm, if you have done, let's see where my, let me get back to my networking ones. If you have done NetMiko, then you've used object-oriented, you've been a user of it. If you have used Nmap, all of these things that we have done, especially in the networking world where people created packages, what they've done is they've created something that uses object-orientedness. Now, you are using the object and you are benefiting from calling functions like here nm scan result or nm.scan. That's probably a better example. You are the beneficiary of the object-orientedness of this Nmap functionality. Similarly, when you do Napalm and we say napalm device.getFacts, you're the beneficiary of the fact that the nice person or people, I'm not sure if there's multiple people currently who do Napalm, but let's say the person who implemented it in such a way that they return to you this object called a napalm device. And so, or called whatever you want to call it, but when you created the object, they gave you something. And from that point, you could then just call a method associated with that object called getFacts or getInterfaces or getVLANs, etc. So you are and have already done basically this, a lot of the higher intelligent stuff that you have been doing with Nmap and Scapy and with NetMiko and Napalm, etc. You have been the beneficiary of it, and you see it made it so easy for you. You didn't even realize that you were programming object-oriented stuff, but you actually were. Now, you were just a consumer of that, but you actually were using it, and so your code and data was able to benefit from the objects that were created there. So real-world situation is going to be something like this. So let's look a little bit more at some of the definitions of how you do this. So this stuff right here is how you define your what will eventually become your object. So your object is defined as a class. So in this situation, I've taken some code that I've written and I've created something called a device. and I'm creating it as a class. All right, so in fact, hang on just a second. I think I want to make this bold so it's easier for you to read. Let's see if I can do that. All right, so I created what will become an object when I create instance of it. I created a class called device. So when we define this thing that will become an object, we call it a class, and it is a class definition. When we create one of them, we will call that an object or an object instance because it's creating an instance of that particular object. Now, if I look back here, then you know in an object-oriented world, I'm going to define my object, which I define with a class definition, and then there's going to be data and there's going to be code associated with it. And different languages, especially statically typed languages, are explicit in their declaration of data. In Python, we don't have statically typed and defined data, and consequently, we just begin to use data. And if it's used as a string, then it becomes a string, etc. So we know how that works. How is this going to work trying to make Python into an object-oriented language? Well, the way that we do it typically is we're going to, and here's this init thing again. So we're going to become familiar with that. I will tell you this right now. It's called a constructor, and this is what gets called when an object instance is created. But I'm talking about data. And so the data that's going to be associated with this object instance is going to be referred to using the self variable that points to the actual object. So self.name points to the name for the object. Self.hostname is going to point to the host name for the object. So that is how we define the data that is specific to that particular object instances. We refer to it with this self. It's like a keyword. It is the thing that refers to the actual object instance. In some languages, if you've done C or Java, then you refer to this as this. The word is this, but in Python, they chose the word self. So it refers to the actual object instance. Now, this is my class definition. Remember, I'm defining what will become my object. And let's look at this right here really quick. I want to tell you that this is the constructor. That means when I instantiate, also known as create, an instance of this device class, which will become my object, this will get called. And we're going to see that when we look down here at object instance. And you'll see that in just a minute when we get down there. These are the parameters that are going to get passed to it. Now, for every member method, every function that you see with the def keyword inside of a class, we call it a method instead of a function. So with every method, it's going to start, if it's an actual method of the object, then it is going to start, the first parameter will always be self. When it gets called, you won't be passing that in. There's some magic that takes place. But what you do pass in is name, device type, host name, and transport. And let's peek ahead down here. Look at this. I am creating an object instance of the device class. And what am I passing in? Well, that looks suspiciously like a name for the device. The second thing looks, especially because I defined this thing called device type. I've defined that in my code. Don't worry about the details there. That's the device type. Here is something that looks like the host name. And then I also created something called transport because of the way that I implemented stuff. Now, this, let me pause for a second and put this into your brain. This is not how I would implement device hierarchy if I was building an object-oriented language necessarily. But what I've done is I've created some code that is going to represent object-orientedness that's going to be up above Napalm and up above NetMiko and up above NC Client. We're going to get to the code in a little bit. In fact, I'm not even 100% sure we're going to get to the code in this instance of the lesson because I don't want it to go too long, but I do want you to have the general idea of what I'm doing here. And so that is why I have this thing called transport type. You don't have to worry about that right now. This is definitely not the canonical way to do things if you are going to be simulating a device object. All right, but let's get back to this. I have my constructor that passes in these things, and you can see all I'm really doing is I'm setting my object instance for this member variable called name equal to the name that got passed in, and I'm doing the same thing for host name for the host name that got passed in. Now I only put a little bit of code in here. There's more code in the actual code that I wrote, but you get the general idea. This is the constructor, and typically in the constructor, in fact, I think in PyCharm it squawks at me if I don't do this. It wants this data to be defined in this init just so that everything that's going to be used is very visible. So that is the data that's been defined. This is the constructor that gets called when I create an instance of this. And here's an example of a method. Now, a method is just a function that lives within a class definition. And basically, when you have a device, in other words, when we create one of these things, then I'm going to be able to call connect, and it is going to magically go out and do whatever it needs to do in order to connect to the device. And that is what we will be looking at when we get at the code and begin to examine it. Now that is the class definition. What happens when I want to actually create an object instance, or when I want to create an object? This is the template, basically, and then when I create one, this is what its characteristics will be. Now, how do you create one? Well, you create one in Python the way that you do it in other languages, and that is where you just declare this thing, which is actually the class name, and then you pass in the parameters that will be used when it gets instantiated. And so when I do this, when I've done this, and I have my device point at it, guess what I have? I have one of these objects. I just created one of those, or one of these if it's easier to see. I've just created an instance. In fact, let's look right here. What if I have 3 devices? Well, I'll probably have 3 just like you see right here. In fact, this is, now that I think about it, a decent representation of the code that I wrote, because I actually create 3 instances of my device object. So I'm going to have 3 of these. Each one is going to have its own data. In other words, looking back, well, let's see, I actually have the code here. We can look at it. Looking here, each one is going to have its own data, and each one is going to have its own methods that I can call. Now, don't get looking too much at this. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. But each one will have its own set of data, and it might potentially have its own different set of code. So that is what we're talking about creating when we create an object instance. So this is how you create it. And if this looks familiar to you and you think, I think I've seen some of that before, well, if you've been a user of things like, let's go to my Nmap here, just because I had that on my mind and I had to look into this. Here with my Nmap, what did I create? Now, if I had said from Nmap import port scanner, then it would have looked, you wouldn't have seen this, and it would have just said port scanner, and then it would have looked like what you see down here. If you don't know what I mean there, so I'm going to say from Nmap import port scanner. So I'm going to import port scanner, and that means that I can do this. And at this point in time, this looks quite similar to this, where I say I've got my variable name and I'm setting it equal to this thing, which is capitalized because it's probably going to be a class definition. And so if I go in here and I do Control B, it's going to go, wow, look at this. I'm in Nmap code, okay? I'm in the bowels of Nmap code, and here's my port scanner. Notice that it's a class, so this is where we'll do a little bit of scavenging, not scavenging, but just kind of exploring different packages that use classes as part of what we're going to talk about here. But here's an example where I'm actually creating an instance and I'm calling it NM. And I suspect down here I probably have port scanner async, so let's just fix that and say comma port scanner async. And at this point in time, I just need to get rid of this. So here you're learning a little bit about imports and how you do imports. You can import specific names, and then I don't have to do nmap dot. That's common. I don't know if I've emphasized that enough. Hopefully that makes sense to you. But if you do it like this, then you don't need, then anytime, all you need to do is reference port scanner or port scanner async, and it knows, oh, that's part of nmap. So it goes to nmap, and like for my port scanner async, here I'm going down, here's my port scanner async, and you can see all of this stuff. Okay, so that is the definition of the class and the instantiation of the actual object and how that happens. Okay, so we've looked at object-oriented programming and how in certain cases it does reflect reality a little bit better than the way that we traditionally did things, how encapsulation can help hide details that can be otherwise implemented inside these objects and hidden from the person who is using those objects. What we want to look at next is going to be inheritance and a little bit polymorphism also. So let's look at this slide right here. And this slide represents one way, in fact, the way that I actually implemented an inheritance model for devices and different mechanisms for accessing these devices. Now, before I go any further, if I was building something similar to Napalm, what I would be doing is what would make sense to you as the most logical way to model the network, which would be, there would be something like this called device, and then there would be Juniper device and Arista device and HP device and Cisco device, and then underneath like Cisco device you would have CSR device, and you would have Nexus device, and you might have iOS XR device, etc., etc. And that would be the way that you would model the network in a hierarchy. Now that's already been done, and we have actually just finished using NetMiko, Napalm, and NC Client. So it occurred to me that as a teaching mechanism, it might be interesting to create something called device that abstracted the manner in which you could get stuff from devices. And in one situation, it would get them using the NetMiko Python library. In one case, it would use the Napalm library. In one case, it would use the NC Client library. And so I've modeled it like this. I'm not recommending this is the way to model things in the network, although if you think about it, Napalm may have different device classes for using NetMiko versus using NC Client for the netconf stuff, maybe using NXAPI for doing the NXAPI stuff. I don't know how it's implemented underneath. I could look at that, but we're not doing that right now. But this is a way just to demonstrate how, via abstraction and modeling via objects, we can make things a whole lot simpler. So let's look at this. Here I have device. Now this is going to be called my base class. It's going to be the class from which the others are going to inherit. And in this base class, what you typically will end up having is you will have things that are common to all of the subclasses. So hostname, every device is going to have a hostname. IP address, in our situation anyway, every device is going to have an IP address. In terms of methods, I have this method here called hostname. You can see the parentheses, the open and close parentheses. That means it's not just a piece of data. This is not a typo. This is actually a function, which in the class, remember, we call functions by the name method. It is a method for getting the host name. And so certain ways that people implement things. You would have get underscore host name. Others say that if you're just getting a piece of data, then you make it simpler and you make it shorter and you get rid of the get underscore. And so people will implement getters, which is what getting a piece of data is often referred to. It will use just the name of the thing that you are getting. So you can choose to do that however you want. You can involve yourself in religious wars about whether this should be get underscore or whatever if you like. Now, if you look down here, just as an aside, I've got get facts. Well, facts isn't an attribute of this object. It is something I'm going to have to actually go out and get. The same with the configuration. It's not stored locally. It's not a piece of data here. So that's why this does not have a get in front of it, just so you know. And you can argue about that or not, depending on your own personal whim. Now, I've used, just for your information, I've used a little bit of UML diagramming to indicate inheritance. The way that you indicate inheritance is with an arrow that points up at the thing that is the higher level class. So this would be a more specific class or a subclass. This would be the base class in this situation. And just again to reiterate, here is the data, here are the methods, and you can see that I've done a similar thing down here. Here's the data, here's the methods. So let's pause for a second and look at this. Now, when I connect to a NetMiko device, the thing that it gives me back is called, in its language, a connection. When I connect to a Napalm device, the thing that gives it back, the thing that it gives back to me, it calls a device. And with NC Client, it gives me, again, something called a connection. So I could have called it a common thing, but since I'm within the subclass, I can call it what is appropriate for that item, because this is going to be hidden from the users of whatever service it is that I'm providing. Likewise, the thing on the inside, I just called it SSH port in here, because for NetMiko it's going to be SSH. For Napalm, it's just a port because I could be using SSH or I could be using netconf for something else. And for NC Client, it's going to be the netconf port. You can call this whatever you want, and I actually, in reality, I haven't actually implemented this inheritance piece yet. I've done the more generic version. But the point is, these are going to be methods that somebody is going to get a device and they're going to call the method. And the connect method for NetMiko device is going to be different in its implementation, in other words, in the internals, the details, than connect is for a Napalm device, than connect is for an NC Client device. But if you are writing an application, all you need to do is call connect and it does the magic for you. You don't have to worry about that. In a like manner, the way that I have implemented this, you can call get facts and you don't have to worry about the fact that it's being done for NetMiko device mechanism, the transport of NetMiko or Napalm or NC Client. It's going to go and get the facts and return them to you. So it allows one word that we tend to use is separation of concerns. It's been referred to in other cases as layering or abstraction, or it just allows somebody who's writing the application that's using these devices not to have to worry about any of the details about how the actual communication take place. All you need to do is call get facts or get config or whatever it might be, and it will return the information for you. And that's what I've actually implemented. So we will look at that code. I'm suspecting that this lesson, because it's already going pretty long, is going to be pretty much just the theory, and we will actually look at the code in great detail in the next lesson. But I have one more thing to teach you, one thing that's actually quite important, and we're not actually going to be going into this in code, but I do have examples of it in Quokka, and I'll be going over that with you in a later lesson, but I want you to understand this. Now, what we've been doing is this thing that you see down here in the bottom right. we've defined a class. And if you've been going through the Quokka walkthrough, one thing you may notice, I called these things members before, and that was technically not precise enough, because anything associated with a class is a member, whether it's a member variable or a member method. And so I've updated this slide to appropriately. I would love to have called it member variables, but I want it to be readable on this slide, so I just call it variables. So this is your data and this is your code, okay? So you have your class definition with your data and with your code, and then you create a number of instances. Remember, these are object instances of that particular class. So imagine that this is device, the class is device. Then in this situation, I'm showing 4 of them. I would have 4 different devices that I have actually created and I'm doing stuff with. So this is the kind of normal way that we use objects in object-oriented world. But there are other ways that are used quite commonly and that you might want to be aware of. And these two are a little bit in the same category, but the way that they manifest themselves in terms of how you interact with them is actually a little bit different. In both of these cases, there's only going to be one object per se, and I'm putting object in air quotes there just so that you know. There's only going to be one instance or one occurrence of this particular thing. And in this singleton situation, what I did is I created an object instance that has its own variables and methods. But what I've done, what I would do, is I will create mechanisms so that there will always only be one of these things. In other words, in a case like this with devices, you will create many of these devices. But if you have some piece of data that maybe is representing a mapping of information from one type of data to another type of data, or some other type of thing for which there's only going to be one of these, then you would create what we call a singleton. And if this is getting beyond your level of comfort, don't worry, I just want you to have experienced these words before. Now the other situation in which there is only one of these things is if you deal with things in a static manner. So you can create what in object-oriented programming vocabulary is called a static class. In that situation, in your class definition itself, you have variables and you have methods. And we do this in Quokka in a few situations. You have data and you have code, but there's only one of them, and it is associated with the class itself, not with an object instance. So I just want you to be aware of the existence of these things. These are part of the world of object-orientedness. If you are new and it's too confusing and it's blowing your mind, you have my permission to completely forget about this. Just keep the name in your mind and say, oh yeah, I ran across that once before. This is the situation that most people end up talking about when we're talking about object-oriented programming and the whole idea of the advantages of it, etc. Okay, so that does it for my theoretical overview of what object-oriented programming is all about. Hopefully that made at least a little bit of sense to you. Okay, I'm going to review what we talked about in this lesson now. Don't click the end or whatever it is that you click when you're done here, because I'm going to be going over stuff. If this is even moderately new to you, then it's good to hear it twice. And I think that this is going to be probably one of the more important of my wrap-ups. I'm assuming that you guys end up listening to them, but if you typically get bored at this point, you may want to stick around and just make sure that you have got this firmly in your brain. So we talked about the traditional way of doing things, how we just had separate data and code, and any code could deal with any data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And how in an object-oriented world, instead of doing things in that manner, and we did look at, what did we look at as an example of that? We looked at like devices, and we saw that we created a bunch of data. We had some code that did stuff. We printed it. Comparisons or maybe nested data is a little bit better, where we created a network. So that gave us all of our data, and then we did all of this different code to it, copying it and looking at what happened, etc. Comparisons, a similar type deal. So that's the way that we did it before. And the way that object-oriented programming says is a good way to consider doing is, instead of doing things like this in kind of a Wild West manner, you create objects, and these objects have their own data and they have their own code. So every one of these, being an object instance, has its own data that represents it and has its own code associated with that. So what does that mean, and what are the advantages? The advantages are, number one, it kind of reflects reality. If you think about human beings or characters in a game, or cars in a game, or cars in reality, or any of a number of things, we are like objects where we have data associated with us, and we have code or functions or things that we do or things that we can be asked to do, etc. So this reflects reality certainly more than the traditional way of writing code does. When you write it like this, you got to keep track of all that stuff. But this is a better reflection of reality. One of the nice things about this is, hey, if I'm doing it this way, then I can just present this object to the outside world, and I can hide all the ugly details about, let's say, how I communicated with a device, how I communicated with a database, or with some other entity, some other package that was provided. So I can hide all of that information that is unnecessary to the consumer of whatever service I'm providing. And so it's a very nice way to be able to do that. We talked about inheritance, so you can have things that are types of things like, devices would be a classic one, where you have different types of devices, such as Juniper, Cisco, HP, Arista, what have you, and on and on and on. So you have different types of things. We talked about a shape, and different types of shapes would be a rectangle or a circle or a triangle, and different types of those. You could have an isosceles triangle, or you could have a right triangle, etc., etc. So those are all, it reflects reality, and you can build intelligence into what we call the base class, and then do specific things in the subclasses. We talked about polymorphism. If we want to present code in the form of methods to somebody to do something, then we can have the same command, effectively the same method, do different things depending on the type. So that is one of the possibilities. We talked about how, these things like Paramiko, NetMiko, Napalm, etc., they make use of object-oriented stuff. That's how you're able to not have to worry about all of the details. I mentioned that we don't have to handle the details and the differences with Napalm. You can just say get facts, and it will get you the facts for the device, whether it uses netconf or SSH or some other mechanism, CLI, or what have you, for communicating with the device. So we looked at that. We gave a little bit of comfort, hopefully, if you were concerned that are you going to have to rewrite everything, and how would you do that? No, you can keep as much as you want the same, but you can consider using object-oriented stuff. And in fact, this is the way most Python programs are written, is the combination of traditional way of doing things and some object-oriented stuff to go with it. We looked a little bit at how you do this, and we wanted to make sure that you understand there's something called a class definition. That is the code that looks like this, where you define the class, and I mentioned a little bit about this, about the constructor for doing init and the data that we had, and then also methods that we would have, like connect to the device. And then that's the definition, and then we create an instance where we have a specific instance of the thing, and we pass in these parameters. And at that point in time, we have something called a device. And we mentioned that we've done stuff like this before in Nmap and Napalm and others, where we actually created something, and we had basically a reference to that object, and then we could call functions on that object, and it would do it for us, whether it would be get facts from Napalm or scan from Nmap, etc. After we talked about that, we just recently talked about inheritance and the coolness about inheritance. You have your base class here where you define your data and your code, and then for your specific stuff, you have your subclasses. So each one of these three examples is going to do connect in a different way. They're going to do get facts in a different way. They're going to do get config in a different way. So each of these is a separate implementation. And the last thing we talked about is a little bit more towards the advanced side, but we mentioned, yes, there are these things called normal objects. Well, they're not called normal objects. They're just called classes and objects. And this is the normal way that we deal with them, but there are other specialist classes and objects that we may need to use and that you may see used. One of them would be something called a singleton, where you create one instance and you don't allow any more to be created. And another one would be to use classes in a static manner, in which case you're only referencing that class. So we looked a little bit at code, but we're going to look more at code next time. Hopefully this has been helpful to you, and you know a little bit more now about objects and classes and instances and inheritance and abstraction and encapsulation and polymorphism and all that good stuff. At least if those words are planted in your brain, then I will feel like this lesson has been a success. Thanks for listening.